Are we witnessing the rise of fascism all over the globe? It's possible. And I'll start with the big story this week out of Italy. People are starting to panic. They're alarmed and wondering if this trend will continue. So European voters are rejecting the failed policies of globalism from Italy to Sweden. And this is out of the Federalist. We've got several ruling pro-globalist European coalitions lost control of their nation's respective governments in elections over the past several weeks, marking a major victory for some of the continent's more right-of-center political parties. So on Sunday, Italian voters elected their most conservative government in decades, putting Giorgia Meloni, the leader of the Brothers of Italy party, on track to become the nation's first female prime minister. The biggest ambition we have in life is for Italians to be proud of being Italian, of unfurling the tricolored flag. So there is video circulating showing Italian nationalists taking down a European Union flag to put up their Italian flag. With Brexit as well, as certain people are rejecting the unelected bureaucrats of the EU and switching more to a nationalistic sense, a country identity, and different political views. So throughout the election cycle, Meloni campaigned on the slogan, God, Homeland, and Family, and has been a staunch defender of the Christian nuclear family. So here is a tweet from Greg Price. Here is the new Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. I've never heard any politician so perfectly explain what we're up against and why we fight. And when you watch this video, you'll quickly realize why the establishment is so afraid of her. So roll clip.
Potrei farne tante altre di queste domande. A monte c'è quella che ci facciamo oggi. Perché la famiglia è un nemico? Perché la famiglia fa così paura? C'è una risposta unica per tutte queste domande, perché ci definisce, perché è la nostra identità, perché tutto quello che ci definisce in questo tempo è un nemico, per chi vorrebbe che non avessimo più un'identità e che fossimo solamente schiavi, consumatori perfetti. E allora è sotto attacco l'identità nazionale, è sotto attacco l'identità religiosa, è sotto attacco l'identità di genere, è sotto attacco l'identità familiare. Perché noi non vogliamo essere dei numeri, noi siamo qui per dire che noi non siamo dei numeri, noi difenderemo il valore della persona umana, di ogni singola persona umana, perché ognuno di noi ha un codice genetico unico e irripetibile. E questo, piaccia o no, ha del sacro. Lo difenderemo Dio, la patria e la famiglia, che fanno tanto schifo a qualcuno. Lo faremo per difendere la nostra libertà, perché noi non saremo mai schiavi e semplici consumatori in balia della speculazione finanziaria. Ecco la nostra missione, ecco perché oggi sono venuta qui.
But in predictable fashion, America's corporate media has gone into overdrive to label Meloni and Italy's new governing coalition as far-right and even fascistic. So an NBC News write-up of Meloni's anticipated victory used some version of the term fascism 16 times. The corporate press wants to throw that in your face and make sure you associate all of these countries that leave the EU or even think about leaving the EU as fascistic or embracing fascism. Italy election results set up a first far-right government since Benito Mussolini, a headline from the Washington Post read. So is Italy's next prime minister, Giorgia Meloni, a fascist? Hardly. So here's another article from the Federalist. Giorgia, as you've doubtlessly heard, is far right, next Prime Minister of Italy. So says virtually every news outlet in the United States. And anyone familiar with the left's perfunctory use of ultra-conservative, far-right, hard-right, or semi-fascist to describe those who take positions to the right of the Democratic Party's latest platform should be skeptical, because it seems like anything that's to the right of them is somehow far right. So are these comparisons fair? Well, let's just take a look at Mussolini. Now, it doesn't matter if it's right or left. I don't really know. Does fascism have to fit on the right? Well, in the old version of the spectrum, that's where they would put it. But there really isn't a whole lot of difference between some of these versions of authoritarianism. Mussolini, if people don't know, started out as a socialist. Much of his early adulthood was spent traveling around Switzerland, getting involved with that country's Socialist Party and clashing with police. He had a history of just kind of a bad attitude troublemaker who was always stirring things up, and he fell into politics and had a lust for power. In 1909, he moved to Austria-Hungary to become editor of a socialist newspaper, but was deported back to Italy, accused of violating laws meant to regulate press freedom. So from an early age, so this is the beginnings of a fascist who does not want press freedom. They want to dictate. But is he really comparable to Meloni? Not really, once you actually dig into it. Now, this is some stuff I got out of the History Channel's website. So in 1910, Mussolini became the editor for another socialist paper, but soon spent 6 months in jail for inciting violence. During his incarceration, though, Mussolini began to write his autobiography while still in his 20s. That's some ambition, detailing his troubled school years and his many romantic conquests. So it sounds like he is a narcissistic sociopath and with delusions of grandeur and megalomania, perhaps. The megalomaniac Mussolini split from the Socialist Party in 1914, starting his own newspaper. He encouraged violence from his supporters as unrest spread across the country. So I guess the socialists weren't quite radical enough for him. So the Italian fascists courted war veterans and encouraged violence against the socialists, turned on his own people, because they weren't ruthless enough for his tastes, apparently. So Mussolini stockpiled weapons and explosives in his newspaper offices. Does this sound like the Brothers of Italy? No, it doesn't. So is it a fair comparison? No, not at all. Not in the slightest. But that's what they want you to think. It's just, they don't want you to think beyond what they're telling you on the surface. You're supposed to take that and just go, oh my God, did you hear that fascists have taken over Italy and Sweden? Oh my God, and they're going to sweep around Europe? Can you believe they're returning back to that? The Mussolini's first act as a prime minister was to demand special emergency powers, allowing him to rig elections in the fascist favor. So this is kind of similar to some of the world leaders you're seeing now in the rise of COVID. It's special emergency powers, abuse their authority, and you saw a lot of changes to election laws, and you saw a lot of ballot stuffing. You have shady Dominion machinery that nobody audits or knows how it works. They have problems, so people don't really trust the integrity of the election system these days. And back then, it was just really out in the open. They wanted to rig elections to make sure that they could never be ousted from power. And soon the Italian parliament, made suspicious of being anti-fascist, punishable by imprisonment without trial, which is like they're shoving the January 6th protesters into a gulag in D.C. for daring to question the election results and innocently walking into the Capitol building. It's also quite plausible that if the Democrats that are in power right now, if they could get away with it and just made it, if you were anti-democracy, if you will, and they can put you in prison, they absolutely would in a second if they could. And meanwhile, they're claiming that Trump and Make America Great Again are fascists, just like apparently Meloni's a fascist, or there's fascists in Sweden now. It doesn't make any sense, but they don't care about that. They just need their supporters to go along with it. So a few years later, in 1926, all communist members of parliament were arrested and all socialist members expelled. Boy, you kind of screwed either way, no matter what. Probably better off with the king. Imagine if your only political parties were communists, fascists, and socialists. It's every way, which way you're screwed. And in case you weren't convinced, we've got even a leftist former Italian prime minister says that the return of fascism narrative is absolutely fake news. So tried as much as they wanted to just try to drill that into people's heads. Oh my God, fascism, the ladies of fascists, the brothers of Italy. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. No, total bullshit. So here's the tweets, and much to the dismay probably of CNN, according to this prime minister. Personally, I was against this Giorgia Meloni. I'm not her best friend. We're rivals, but she is not a danger to democracy. So the idea there is a risk of fascism in Italy is absolutely fake news. Roll clip.
Personally, frankly speaking, I was against Giorgia Meloni. So I'm not the best friend, and we grew up together in politics, but we are and will be rival always. At the same time, I think that is not a danger for Italian democracy. She is my rival, I'm rival. We will continue to fight each other, but the ideas are now there is a risk of fascism in Italy is absolutely a fake news. She won election, particularly because populism.
Well, there you have it. So you've got a rejection of globalist policies of the World Economic Forum or the European Union or the United Nations, who are trying to override the sovereignty of some of these other countries. People have had enough. It's not really a rise of fascism. It's a rise of populism sweeping across Europe. Anyway, congratulations and good luck to the country of Italy, rejecting the policies, standing strong, and going to be doing your own thing. Looking forward to seeing how that develops. And that's all I've got. So thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.